Hi everyone, thanks for the introduction. I'm going to do this in English, so I hope everyone understands. I think so. Finnish people are smart, I heard. So I would like today to talk to you about open innovation made possible by 3D printing. But before we get into that, I basically need to introduce Faraday Motion as a company because we're going to use that as an example later on. So Faraday Motion, we are developing technology for electric vehicles, and I should start by explaining why we even exist. So the reason why we exist is that basically we want to change the world, and specifically the world of transportation. So we'll do that in two ways. First of all, we want to make urban transportation intelligent and personalized. This also means to inspire people to have higher standards about the vehicles they use every day. And the second way we'll do that is that we want to basically bridge the gap between the so-called technical geniuses and ordinary human beings. So it should be easier to innovate electric vehicles. In essence, we want to make more makers. So first off, how many of you, by raise of hands, have ever been stuck in traffic inside a major city? Anyone? Quite a few people. See, there's a few problems with that. First of all, today's urban transportation is boring. It's actually pretty dangerous. It's poisoning our bodies and our environment. It's inconvenient and it's impersonal. That's not very optimal the way that we see it. So instead we think that it should be fun, it should be safe, it should be healthy, it should be convenient, and it should actually be a reflection of individual needs and personality. So how do you achieve that? Well, then you need to create a whole new category of vehicles. So this category is best explained by using a metaphor. So what happens when personal electric vehicles gets a room with 3D printing and robotics inside a hotel that's called the Internet of Things and makes sweet, sweet love? Well, 9 months later, intelligent electric vehicles are born, and we will be the doctors delivering this baby. So how will we actually deliver this baby? Well, as you see, we basically need to ignite the electric vehicle revolution, and we'll do that in an open way. So we'll have an open source innovation platform for electric vehicle technology. So what that means is that there will basically be a community around things that move. So what do you call that? That's right, it's a movement. So, just to make it a little bit more tangible, what we'll be offering is modular toolkits for personal electric vehicles. So that is hardware, electronics, accessories, and so on. Then we'll have a software app store to make all the hardware work really well. And we'll do workshops to teach people how to build their own electric vehicles. And to do, last but not least, we'll do custom solutions for companies and public institutions. Okay, so now we have the Faraday background sorted, and that's all fine. Let's get into the 3D printing. Normally, I write about 3D printing, and this is my website. And what I want to talk to you about right now is that how can 3D printing boost your business? And by that I mean, how can 3D printing actually allow you to move even closer to what's happening inside the market? But first we need to have some background about the technology that 3D printing builds upon to do open innovation. It all started back with semiconductors and transistors. Improvements in those made it possible to do integrated circuits. Integrated circuits then allowed us to create computers. And then interesting stuff happened, because the computer was basically a platform for everything open source almost. So we have open source hardware, a whole operating system like Linux, for instance. And then also we had development of open source hardware, where the Arduino is a pretty good example. So from Arduino, people started messing around with that, and coincidentally it also happened at the same time that a patent expired for a 3D printing technology called FDM, that people started doing open source 3D printers. And as many of you probably know, that open source 3D printers today work pretty well. And so because of all these previous developments, now Faraday Motion can actually develop a technology platform on top of that. So my point is here that all the technologies supported each other and enabled each other subsequently. So the thing is that when everything is so open, that accelerates innovation a lot. But also at the same time, a lot of companies are becoming worried because what happens when everything is just so open? What about intellectual property right? What about piracy, right? So a good example about how to deal with this kind of aspects is what happened to the music industry, and I think you all have an idea of what happened there. Back then there was the vinyl standard, and everyone was just happy dancing around to disco music. And what happened then was there was a substitution to the CD standard, which was pushed by the industry mainly due to cost savings. And now that was the start of the journey, the digital journey for the music industry, and that actually meant that people found out they could rip CDs, they could burn them down and just copy them whatever they want and send it to their friends as MP3 files via the internet. And well, that created a lot of problems for the industry. So the industry was basically disrupted by its own eagerness to exploit the digital opportunities. They didn't really foresee the consequences. So what they did was they tried to fight it, obviously, and punish people who tried to copy and so on. That didn't really work. So they had to realize that it wouldn't make sense to legislate the way out of it. You had to actually beat the piracy on market terms. So that meant that a transformation happened, and now today you see different business models that are focused on service. So they had to create an offering that is superior to the piracy choice, like streaming services, just like Spotify, for instance. Instead of you having to sit and download and burn and do a lot of stuff, you just click, there you go, all the music you want. So much more convenient. So this meant that, you know, a lot of revenue was lost in the music industry, and even though the music album CD sales went down a lot, it's not until recently that digital music revenue actually surpassed that. So a lot of revenue was lost because companies were not ready to innovate in new business models, and they were basically caught in the old paradigm. So then let's not make the same thing happen for the manufacturing industry when that goes digital. So it can be a little bit hard to grasp when you have to manage different business models at the same time as a company. So that's why I want to draw the attention towards a framework called the business model portfolio. And the business model portfolio is basically stolen directly from a book that's called The Innovation Economy. It was written back in 2006, still extremely relevant, and a lot of companies are not using these kind of ways of managing, which I think personally they should. So what it is that on the left side here on the y-axis, that illustrates how disruptive or how much potential any given business model have on this framework. And here on the x-axis, it basically illustrates how much development is needed in order to make that business model happen. Now the point is that at any given time, an established company should have activities in all areas, basically. They should have a balanced portfolio of business models so that at the same time they're exploiting their current operations and gaining revenue from that, they're also being at the forefront of the market and experimenting with new stuff. Yeah, so this should be balanced. And now you can start thinking, oh, what does that have to do with 3D printing? Well, actually quite a lot, because it fits completely. Let's try to look at what kind of things can you actually use 3D printing for. And there are basically 4 categories. You have, first of all, the standard one, which started 3D printing in itself, prototyping. Then you have tooling, which is obviously creating tools, molds, tooling inserts for conventional manufacturing. Then you have the ramp-up process, which is the stage between prototyping and final manufacturing, where you are producing final parts or components thereof to be marketed while the conventional manufacturing line is being set up. This lowers the risk and gets you faster to the market. Okay, and the last one is the most advanced. That is the use of 3D printing for final fabrication without the intention to switch towards conventional manufacturing at a later stage. And that's quite advanced because yeah, that actually involves a lot of change in mindset inside a company in most cases. So let's try to put these applications, or these categories of applications, into a framework here. You can see that prototyping is something that a lot of companies are using 3D printing for. It makes sense because it doesn't really disturb the business model, it just makes it faster. Tooling is a bit more advanced because it allows you to do more fast things with your production, but still it doesn't really disrupt your own business model. The next thing, ramp up, well, this is where it gets interesting because now you're entering the market faster, you're changing the way and the process of which you are marketing new products. And obviously the last one here, final fabrication, that's something, a business model that a lot of companies should be incubating right now because it's what's going to disrupt industries. Now, this can all seem a little bit fluffy, right? I mean, yeah, new business model, what does it all mean? So, in order to explain that, now I'm coming back to the example of Faraday Motion because we use 3D printing for a variety of things, and that's also why we are so happy about Printer. And first of all, we use 3D printing for all, let's say, the standard stuff. Prototyping, fast design iterations, and so on. But what I'm most happy about is this thing right here. It's called the Faraday Spine. And this is an interesting case because, first of all, it's a 3D printed electric skateboard. And the name itself, the Faraday Spine, resembles a body, a human body. So after you have the spine, you can start adding skeleton, more muscle, heart, brain capacity, and so on. Well, that obviously means motors, more batteries, etc. So the whole idea behind this is that no one really knows what they want until they start trying stuff, until they start experimenting. So this vehicle allows you to get going for an affordable price, and then you start learning about, oh, I actually need more batteries, or maybe I actually need something to help me with the balance and so on. And that's when we come in and we are very happy to make all your dreams come true because we have the technology to make that happen. And so what this means is that basically we're selling a minimal viable product, and then the final personalization is co-created with the customer as an after-sales service. This is a little bit different than the way that things are normally distributed. So you actually you don't really produce the final product until it's already sold. And so just a few key takeaways here. If you as a company want to be at the forefront and be the one that disrupts the competitors, then you have to be ready to change the underlying logic that your company is based on right now. So changing basically your paradigm. That means get your hands dirty or you will probably be left in the dirt at some point. So the last thing I'd like to do here is that I'd like to kill the idea of a killer app. Now, what is a killer app for 3D printing? A killer app, that refers to a universal use case that just rocks everyone's business world. And this is something that people say, oh, we're waiting for the killer app. Well, let me just tell you, this killer app is not going to come by itself. So my personal 3D printing mantra is something that I'd like to end with, and that is passively waiting around for the killer application of 3D printing technology is like expecting the intercity train to pick you up at your front door. That being said, thank you for your attention and thank you for listening. Do we have time for questions?